I never thought installing a heated driveway would turn me into the most hated person in Pinecrest Meadows. But here I was, standing in my garage at 6 in the morning, staring down Barbara Hutchins while she waved a stack of papers in my face like they were some kind of holy scripture. "This is a violation of our community standards, Michael," she shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that could probably shatter the windows of my truck parked behind me. "You are using excessive energy resources that reflect poorly on our neighborhood's commitment to environmental responsibility." I rubbed my eyes, trying to process what was happening. I had been up late the night before working on a snow removal contract for the county, and the last thing I needed was Barbara, the self-appointed queen of the Pinecrest Meadows HOA, lecturing me about my driveway at dawn. "Barbara, it's my driveway. I paid for it with my own money. The HOA approved the installation last summer, remember? You were even at that meeting." Her face turned an impressive shade of red that clashed with her bleached blonde hair. She was probably in her mid-50s, always dressed like she was about to attend a country club luncheon, even though we lived in Morrison, Colorado, where most people wore flannel and hiking boots. Today, she had on a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "That was before we understood the full implications," she snapped. "Do you know how much electricity that thing uses? It makes our entire neighborhood look wasteful. I've already received complaints from 3 other residents." I highly doubted that. Barbara had a habit of inventing complaints to support whatever crusade she was on that particular week. Last month it was my truck being too large. The month before that, she tried to fine me for having Christmas lights up past January 2nd. "The system is actually very efficient," I said, keeping my voice level. "It uses radiant heating tubes with a smart thermostat. It only activates when snow is actually falling, and it costs me less per month than running a space heater." "I don't care about your technical justifications," Barbara said, jabbing her finger toward my chest. "I am issuing you a formal complaint as HOA president. You have 2 weeks to disconnect this system, or you will face fines of $500 per day." I felt my jaw tighten. "You can't do that." "There's nothing in the HOA bylaws about heated driveways. There's a clause about excessive energy consumption and environmental impact. I've already consulted with our HOA attorney, and he agrees this falls under that provision." She thrust the papers into my hands. "You'll be receiving an official notice in the mail, but I wanted to give you the courtesy of a personal warning." Courtesy. Right. Barbara didn't do anything out of courtesy. She did things to assert her authority and make everyone else's life miserable. I looked down at the papers, noting they were just printouts from some random website about energy consumption. There was nothing official here, no actual legal documentation. "I'll be fighting this," I said firmly. "And you should know that according to Colorado law, the HOA needs to provide reasonable justification for any restrictions that weren't in the original covenants. A heated driveway is a reasonable home improvement that increases property value." Barbara's eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the board says about that. The hearing is scheduled for next Thursday at 7 p.m. Don't be late." She spun on her heel, her expensive shoes clicking against my concrete driveway, the very driveway she wanted me to stop heating, and marched back to her silver Lexus parked at the curb. I watched her drive away, feeling a headache building behind my temples. This was exactly the kind of drama I had moved to Colorado to avoid. After spending 15 years in Chicago running a small logistics company, I had sold everything and moved out here 3 years ago to start a snow removal business. Morrison was perfect, small town feel close to Denver, and enough snowfall each winter to keep me busy. I had bought this house in Pinecrest Meadows because it was affordable and gave me the space I needed to park my equipment. The neighborhood was nice enough, a planned community of about 60 homes built in the early 2000s, all with that cookie-cutter suburban aesthetic. Most of my neighbors were decent people. We helped each other out, waved when passing by, did the normal neighborly things. But then Barbara had gotten herself elected HOA president 2 years ago, and everything changed. She ran the HOA like a fascist state. Mailbox not the exact approved shade of black. Fine. Grass a quarter-inch too tall. Fine. Car parked in your driveway instead of the garage. Fine. She had driven 3 families to sell their homes and move away just to escape her tyranny. The rest of us stayed because, well, moving was expensive and time-consuming, and most people just tried to fly under her radar. But I had made a critical error. I had improved my property in a way that was visible and, apparently, offensive to Barbara's sensibilities. The heated driveway had been a practical investment for my business. I worked odd hours, sometimes coming home at 2 or 3 in the morning after plowing commercial lots. The last thing I wanted to do was shovel my own driveway or wait for the sun to melt the ice. The system cost me $8,000 to install, but it was worth every penny for the convenience. I went back inside and made coffee, trying to shake off the anger. My wife, Jennifer, came downstairs in her bathrobe, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. "Was that Barbara I heard?" she asked, already knowing the answer from my expression. "She wants me to disconnect the heated driveway, says it's an environmental hazard or some nonsense." Jennifer sighed and poured herself coffee. "Of course she does. What are you going to do?" "Fight it. I'm not letting her bully me into ripping out a perfectly legal improvement to our own property. You know she won't back down easily. Neither will I." Jennifer gave me a worried look, but didn't argue. She knew how I got when someone tried to push me around. I wasn't naturally confrontational, but I had a strong sense of fairness, and this was anything but fair. The next few days passed in relative quiet. I focused on my work, which was demanding enough to keep my mind occupied. We were in late January, right in the peak of Colorado's snow season. I had contracts with the county to plow several rural roads, plus a dozen commercial parking lots around Morrison and the surrounding areas. My crew consisted of myself and 2 other guys, Tom and Raphael, both solid workers who knew their way around a plow truck. That Thursday, I spent 14 hours straight plowing after a major storm dumped 18 inches on the Front Range. By the time I got home, it was past midnight and I was exhausted. But my driveway was clear and dry, the heated system having done its job perfectly. I pulled into the garage, grateful I didn't have to deal with shoveling or scraping. The next morning, I found another notice from Barbara taped to my front door. This one was more official-looking, typed up on HOA letterhead, and it reiterated everything she had said in person. I was to appear before the HOA board next Thursday to explain why my heated driveway should be allowed to remain in operation. Failure to appear would result in an automatic ruling against me. I called my attorney, a guy named Greg Paulson who handled real estate issues. He listened to my situation and chuckled. "Barbara Hutchins, huh? I've dealt with her before. She tried this same stunt with a guy who installed solar panels. We shut her down pretty quickly." "What are my options?" I asked. "Well, the good news is that heated driveways are completely legal in Colorado, and unless your HOA specifically prohibited them in the original covenants, she doesn't have a leg to stand on. The bad news is that she can make your life hell with legal fees and constant harassment even if she's wrong. So what do you recommend? Go to the hearing. Be polite but firm. Bring documentation showing that your system is efficient and doesn't violate any actual rules. I'll draft a letter for you to present that outlines the legal issues with their position." That should be enough to get the board to back off. Most HOA boards don't want to risk a lawsuit they'll lose. That sounded reasonable. Greg sent me the letter by email that afternoon, and I printed it along with all the documentation from my heated driveway installation. The permits, the efficiency ratings, the energy consumption data, everything. Thursday evening arrived cold and clear. Jennifer came with me to the hearing for moral support. The HOA meetings were held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that also housed a gym and a pool that nobody used in winter. When we walked in, I was surprised to see about 20 residents in attendance. Usually, these meetings drew maybe 5 people. Barbara sat at the front table with 4 other board members, looking smug. She had clearly rallied her supporters. "Thank you all for coming," Barbara began, standing up like she was addressing Congress. "Tonight, we have an important matter to discuss regarding community standards and environmental responsibility. Michael Hendricks has installed a heated driveway system that consumes excessive electricity and sets a poor example for our neighborhood." I noticed several people nodding along. I recognized most of them as Barbara's cronies, people who showed up to every meeting to support whatever she wanted. "Michael, would you like to address the board?" Barbara asked, her tone dripping with false politeness. I stood up, holding my folder of documents. "Yes, thank you. First, I want to clarify that my heated driveway system was installed with all proper permits and approval. I submitted the plans to the HOA last June, and they were approved without objection. Second, the system is highly efficient, using less energy than many common household appliances. I have all the technical specifications here if anyone wants to review them. I walked forward and placed the folder on the table. Barbara didn't even glance at it. "That's all very interesting, Michael, but efficiency isn't the issue. The issue is the message it sends. We are a community that values environmental consciousness. Heating your driveway is wasteful, regardless of how efficient you claim it is. With all due respect, Barbara, my personal energy use is not the HOA's business as long as I'm not violating any specific covenants. And I'm not. My attorney has prepared a statement outlining the legal issues, with attempting to force me to remove a legal improvement from my property." I pulled out Greg's letter and began reading the key points. It was technical but clear. The HOA had no authority to regulate energy consumption beyond what was explicitly stated in the covenants, and heated driveways were not mentioned anywhere in the original documents. Furthermore, Colorado law protected homeowners from arbitrary HOA restrictions on reasonable property improvements. Barbara's face grew tighter with each sentence I read. When I finished, she looked around at the other board members. "Does anyone have questions for Michael?" she asked. One of the board members, a retired accountant named Douglas, raised his hand. "Michael, how much does it actually cost you to run this system per month?" "During active snow months, about $40. The system only runs when snow is detected, and it automatically shuts off once the surface is clear." Douglas nodded thoughtfully. "That seems pretty reasonable, actually." Barbara shot him a look that could melt steel. "The cost isn't the point, Douglas. It's about setting standards." Another board member, a woman named Susan, spoke up. "I'm not sure I understand what standard is being violated. Michael got approval for the installation, and it's not affecting anyone else's property." I could see Barbara starting to lose control of the room. Her face flushed, and she shuffled her papers aggressively. "This board has the authority to interpret the covenants as needed to protect the community's interests," she insisted. "I move that we require Michael to disconnect the system or face daily fines of $500. "I second that motion," said one of her cronies immediately. "All in favor," Barbara called out. 3 hands went up, Barbara and her 2 loyal followers. But Douglas and Susan kept their hands down. The vote was 3-2. "Motion passes," Barbara announced triumphantly. "Michael, you have 2 weeks to comply." I felt my temper rising but kept my voice steady. You should know that I will be filing a formal dispute with the county and, if necessary, pursuing legal action. This ruling is arbitrary and unsupported by the actual covenants. That's your right, Barbara said dismissively. This meeting is adjourned. Jennifer and I walked out into the cold night air. I was furious, not just at the ruling but at the smug look on Barbara's face. They can't actually enforce that, can they? Jennifer asked. Not legally, no. But they can try, and it will cost us money and time to fight it. That's what she's counting on, that I'll just give in to avoid the hassle. We drove home in silence. I spent the rest of the night researching Colorado HOA laws and previous cases. The more I read, the more confident I became that Barbara was overstepping her authority. But I also realized this was going to be a long, drawn-out battle. The following Monday, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney threatening legal action if I didn't comply within the 2-week deadline. I forwarded it to Greg, who assured me it was mostly bluster. They're trying to intimidate you, he said. Don't disconnect anything, let them make the first move and we'll respond appropriately. I took his advice, but the stress was getting to me. I started losing sleep, worrying about legal fees and the possibility of endless fines. Jennifer tried to keep me calm, but she was worried too. Then, about a week after the hearing, we got hit with another major snowstorm. This one was a monster, dropping over 2 feet in less than 24 hours. The county activated emergency protocols, and I was out with my crew plowing nonstop for 36 hours straight. Here's the thing about my snow removal business that I hadn't mentioned to Barbara or anyone else at the HOA. I was actually the contractor responsible for plowing several streets in our own neighborhood. The county had subdivided the plowing contracts years ago, and I had won the bid for our section of Morrison, which included Pinecrest Meadows. Most of my neighbors had no idea because I usually plowed at odd hours, and my trucks weren't marked with anything identifying me personally. But as I was finishing up one of my commercial lots that second night, exhausted and running on nothing but coffee and adrenaline, I had an interesting realization. Barbara lived on Spruce Lane, one of the streets included in my contract. And technically, while I was required to plow the main roads for emergency access, the county contract had some flexibility regarding the frequency and priority of residential streets, especially during multi-day storm events. I'm not proud of what I thought next, but I was tired, angry, and fed up with Barbara's nonsense. So when I made my plowing rounds through Pinecrest Meadows that night, I plowed every street except Spruce Lane. I hit all the main routes, made sure emergency access was clear, but I just happened to skip that one residential street where Barbara and her closest cronies lived. It was petty. I knew it was petty. But it also wasn't technically a violation of my contract. The county requirements specified main roads and emergency routes, with residential streets being secondary priority during active storm conditions. I documented everything carefully, time-stamps, photos, the works, just in case. The storm finally broke Thursday morning. I went home, collapsed into bed, and slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up Friday afternoon, my phone was exploding with messages. 17 missed calls from Barbara, 9 voicemails, each one angrier than the last. Text messages ranging from "Why hasn't our street been plowed?" to "This is unacceptable," to "I know you did this on purpose." There were also messages from the county supervisor asking about the status of Pinecrest Meadows. I called him back first. "Hey Mike, got some complaints from Spruce Lane residents." "What's the situation there?" "Storm protocols," I explained. During the active storm phase, I prioritized main routes and emergency access per the contract requirements. Spruce Lane is categorized as tertiary priority. I was planning to get to it today now that the primary routes are handled. Got it. Just wanted to check. The complainant was pretty upset, said you were deliberately neglecting her street. Just following the contract priorities. You can check my logs if needed. Nah, I trust you. You've never given us problems before, just get to it when you can. I hung up and smiled, then I listened to Barbara's voicemails. They were spectacular. She went from confused to annoyed to absolutely enraged over the course of the messages. The last one, left at 8 that morning, was her literally screaming into the phone. I know what you're doing, Michael. This is retaliation and it's illegal. I'm reporting you to the county and I'm calling the police. You can't just leave our street buried in snow because you're mad about the driveway hearing. This is criminal negligence. I saved all the messages just in case. Then I got dressed, climbed into my truck, and headed out to plow the commercial properties that needed afternoon clearing. I pointedly did not go to Spruce Lane. By Saturday morning, I had 18 more messages from Barbara. Several other Spruce Lane residents had also started calling, though they were much more polite about it. I responded to the polite ones with apologetic texts explaining that the storm had required prioritization protocols, and that I would get to their street as soon as possible. To Barbara, I didn't respond at all. Finally, Saturday afternoon, I drove my truck to Spruce Lane. The street was buried under nearly 3 feet of packed snow. Several cars were stuck in driveways, unable to get out. I could see people out with shovels trying to dig their way out. It looked miserable. I drove past slowly, making sure Barbara saw me. She was outside with a shovel, her face red from exertion and cold. When she spotted my truck, she threw down the shovel and stormed toward me. I stopped and rolled down my window. You did this on purpose, she shrieked. You left our street buried out of spite. I've been following county protocols, I said calmly. Main roads and emergency routes get priority during active storms. Residential streets get handled after. Every other street in the neighborhood was plowed days ago. Those streets are classified differently in the county system. You can take that up with the county planning department if you have concerns. This is retaliation. You're punishing me because of the hearing. I gave her my best innocent look. Barbara, I don't control the county's priority system. I just follow the contract. But you know, this whole situation has made me think about resource management and community responsibility. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Well, you were so concerned about my heated driveway using electricity. I figured you'd appreciate me being more conscious about fuel consumption and equipment wear. Reducing unnecessary trips, prioritizing efficiently, that kind of thing. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She knew exactly what I was doing, but she couldn't prove anything. I was following the letter of my contract, even if I was bending the spirit of it. You're a spiteful, petty man, she finally spat out. And you tried to fine me $500 a day for heating my own driveway. I guess we're both guilty of being unreasonable. I started to roll up my window, but she grabbed the door. I will make your life a living hell over this, she threatened. You were already doing that. Here's the thing, Barbara, you wanted to play hardball over something that doesn't affect you at all. Well, congratulations. Now you get to experience what it's like when I stop going out of my way to help you. You have a contract to plow this street, and I will, when it fits into the priority schedule. Which, according to the county guidelines, could be up to 72 hours after a major storm for tertiary residential routes. This storm ended Thursday morning, so I've got until tomorrow morning to be in full compliance. Her face turned purple. Tomorrow morning, we've been trapped here for 3 days. Should have thought about that before trying to fine me thousands of dollars for using my own property. Have a nice day, Barbara. I rolled up the window and drove away, leaving her standing in the snow screaming obscenities at my truck. It was immature and petty, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. I did eventually plow Spruce Lane, Sunday morning, exactly 72 hours after the storm ended, right at the edge of my contractual obligation. By then, several residents had hired private services to dig them out, costing them hundreds of dollars each. Barbara had apparently tried to shovel her own driveway and thrown out her back, according to the neighborhood gossip I heard later. The following Tuesday, I received another certified letter from the HOA. This one threatened to revoke my right to park my work vehicles at my property and demanded immediate compliance with the heated driveway ruling. The deadline had technically passed, and they were now claiming I owed fines totaling $7,000. I forwarded everything to Greg, who drafted a comprehensive response explaining why the HOA's actions were illegal and threatening a countersuit for harassment. He sent it certified mail to both the HOA and their attorney. That's when things escalated in a way I didn't expect. 2 weeks later, I came home to find my heated driveway system had been vandalized. Someone had poured concrete down several of the access pipes, effectively destroying the system. The damage was estimated at over $12,000. I called the police immediately. A sheriff's deputy came out, took a report, and examined the damage. I showed him the security camera footage from my garage, which had captured 2 figures approaching my driveway at 3 in the morning, working on something near the access points, then leaving in a vehicle that was just barely visible in the frame. "Can you identify the vehicle?" the deputy asked. "Not clearly, but it looks like a silver sedan, possibly a Lexus." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "You know anyone who drives a car like that?" "The HOA president drives a silver Lexus, but I can't say for sure if that's her car." "You've been having disputes with your HOA." I explained the whole situation, the hearing, the fine threats, the snow plowing incident. The deputy took notes and said they would investigate. "Even if we can't prove who did it, this is clearly criminal mischief," he said. "Whoever did this is looking at felony charges given the amount of damage." Over the next few days, the sheriff's department did their investigation. They interviewed Barbara, whose story apparently fell apart under questioning. She claimed to have been home all night, but her husband contradicted her, saying she had gone out around 2:30 in the morning, claiming she needed to check on something at the clubhouse. Then came the break in the case. One of the figures in my security footage was wearing a distinctive jacket with a logo on the back. When the deputies searched Barbara's house with a warrant, they found that exact jacket in her garage, along with receipts from a hardware store for the concrete mix used to vandalize my system. Even more damning, her car's GPS system showed she had been at my address at 3:15 a.m. on the night of the vandalism. Barbara was arrested and charged with felony criminal mischief and conspiracy to commit criminal mischief. Her accomplice turned out to be her friend Janet, one of the board members who had voted with her at the hearing. Janet cracked immediately when questioned, admitting that Barbara had convinced her this was justified because I was destroying the neighborhood and needed to be taught a lesson. The arrest made local news. HOA president arrested for vandalizing homeowner's property was the headline in the Morrison Gazette. The story detailed the dispute over the heated driveway and Barbara's vindictive response. Within days, the story got picked up by Denver media outlets, and then it went viral on social media. Suddenly, I was getting interview requests from local news stations. I declined most of them, but I did agree to one interview with a reporter who had covered HOA abuse stories before. I explained the situation calmly and factually, emphasizing that I had installed a legal improvement to my property and Barbara had responded with threats, fines, and ultimately criminal vandalism. The story resonated with people. Everyone seemed to have their own HOA horror story, and Barbara became the poster child for overreaching HOA tyranny. The comments online were brutal. People called her a petty dictator, a criminal, a bully. Some were more colorful in their descriptions. The fallout was swift. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Barbara as president. They also voted to rescind all fines against me and issue a formal apology. The HOA's insurance company contacted me to discuss covering the damage to my heated driveway system, but Barbara's legal troubles were just beginning. The criminal case proceeded quickly. Her attorney tried to argue that she had been under stress and had made a poor decision, but the premeditated nature of the crime, buying supplies, recruiting an accomplice, traveling to my house in the middle of the night, made it hard to paint this as a momentary lapse in judgment. In May, Barbara pleaded guilty to criminal mischief in exchange for the prosecution dropping the conspiracy charges against Janet, who had agreed to testify if needed. She was sentenced to 90 days in jail, 18 months probation, and ordered to pay full restitution for the damage to my driveway, plus my legal fees. The total came to just over $30,000. I also filed a civil lawsuit against Barbara personally for the damage, harassment, and emotional distress. My attorney argued that her actions as HOA president had exceeded her authority and constituted personal malicious conduct. That case settled out of court for an additional $40,000, most of which came from Barbara's personal assets, since the HOA insurance refused to cover intentional criminal acts. The money was nice, but what really mattered was the principle. Barbara had tried to bully me into submission over something completely unreasonable, and when I stood my ground, she had escalated to criminal behavior. Now she was facing the consequences of her actions. The neighborhood changed significantly after Barbara's arrest. The new HOA president was a retired engineer named Patricia, who actually believed in reasonable governance. One of her first acts was to commission a complete review of the HOA bylaws and remove or clarify vague provisions that could be abused. The clause about excessive energy consumption that Barbara had tried to use against me was removed entirely. Patricia also implemented new checks and balances, so no single board member could unilaterally threaten homeowners with fines or legal action. All enforcement actions now required a majority board vote after the homeowner had a chance to present their case. My relationship with my neighbors improved too. Many of them came forward to apologize for not speaking up during the hearing. They had been afraid of becoming Barbara's next target. I understood that fear, but I was glad we could move past it. As for my snow plowing business, the incident actually brought me more work. The local news coverage had mentioned my company, and several businesses reached out asking for quotes. I ended up hiring 2 more crew members and expanding into commercial landscaping during the off-season. The heated driveway was fully repaired by late June, ready for the next winter season. I made sure to get extra security cameras installed too, covering every angle of my property. I wasn't expecting trouble, but after everything that had happened, I believed in being prepared. Jennifer and I considered moving after the whole ordeal, but we decided to stay. This was our home, we had put work into it, and we weren't going to let Barbara's vindictiveness drive us away. Plus, with her gone, Pinecrest Meadows actually became a pleasant place to live. That summer was peaceful. I focused on my business and enjoyed my property without worrying about HOA harassment. My neighbors were friendlier. There were community barbecues and block parties, and people actually talked to each other instead of just worrying about who might report them for some minor violation. In August, I ran into Barbara at the grocery store. She looked terrible, older, worn down, defeated. She saw me and immediately turned to walk away, but I called out to her, "Barbara, wait." She stopped, her shoulders tense, but didn't turn around. "I just want you to know," I said, walking around to face her, I never wanted any of this to happen. I just wanted to heat my own driveway." She looked at me with tired, bitter eyes. "You got what you wanted. I lost everything, my position, my reputation, my savings. Are you happy now?" "No, I'm not happy that any of this happened." "But you made choices, Barbara. You could have left me alone. You could have backed down when your own board members disagreed with you. Instead, you escalated and escalated until you committed a crime." "That's on you, not me." "I thought I was protecting the neighborhood," she said quietly. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "You thought you were enforcing your personal preferences on everyone else. There's a difference." She didn't respond, just turned and walked away. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of pity and frustration. She still didn't get it. She still saw herself as a victim instead of acknowledging that she had abused her power and paid the price. I finished my shopping and went home. Jennifer was in the backyard with our dog, a golden retriever named Cooper. It was a beautiful summer evening, warm and clear, with the mountains visible in the distance. "How was the store?" Jennifer asked, ran into Barbara. "Oh God, how did that go?" "About as well as you'd expect. She's still playing the victim." Jennifer shook her head. "Some people never learn." We sat on the back deck, watching Cooper chase butterflies in the grass. Life was good. The heated driveway saga had been stressful and expensive, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself and not backing down from bullies. When winter came around again, I made sure to enjoy every moment of my heated driveway. The first snow of the season fell in November, and I stood in my garage at 5 in the morning, coffee in hand, watching the system automatically activate and clear the snow as it fell. It was beautiful. I also made sure to plow Spruce Lane promptly that winter. Not because I had to. Barbara had moved away by then, selling her house at a loss to get away from the neighborhood that had turned against her. I plowed it promptly because that's what a good contractor does. The new family that moved into Barbara's old house was lovely, and they didn't deserve to be punished for their predecessors' actions. The HOA situation stabilized completely. Patricia ran things efficiently and fairly. Meetings were productive instead of contentious. People actually volunteered to serve on committees because they weren't afraid of being bullied. It was like the entire neighborhood took a collective breath and relaxed once Barbara was gone. In February, I got a letter from the Colorado HOA Reform Coalition, a nonprofit that advocated for homeowner rights. They had read about my case and wanted to use it as an example in their lobbying efforts for stronger legal protections against HOA abuse. I agreed, and I even testified before a state legislative committee that was considering new regulations. "The problem isn't HOAs themselves," I told the committee. "The problem is when individuals are given too much unchecked power and use it to pursue personal vendettas. Homeowners need clear rights and clear remedies when an HOA oversteps its authority." The legislation ended up passing, creating new requirements for HOA governance and giving homeowners more options for disputing unreasonable fines or restrictions. It wouldn't prevent every abuse, but it was a step in the right direction. My business continued to grow. By the spring, I had 6 employees and enough contracts to keep us busy year-round. I bought a new truck and upgraded some of our equipment. Jennifer quit her job at the insurance company to help run the business full-time, handling scheduling and billing while I managed the operations. We even ended up expanding the house, adding a home office and a larger garage. This time, I made sure to submit every form and get every approval in triplicate before starting construction. Patricia approved everything without drama, and the project went smoothly. One Saturday afternoon in June, we hosted a neighborhood barbecue at our house. 40 people showed up, including most of the HOA board. We grilled burgers and hot dogs, kids played in the sprinklers, and adults sat around talking and laughing. It was the kind of community event that should have been normal, but felt special after everything we had been through. Douglas, the board member who had voted against Barbara's fine proposal, approached me with a beer in hand. "You know, Mike, I've been wanting to apologize for how that whole thing went down. I should have fought harder against Barbara's proposal. You voted against it," I pointed out. "That took courage, not enough courage. I should have been more vocal, maybe convinced Susan and the others to push back harder. Instead, I let it get to a vote. It worked out in the end," I said, "and the neighborhood is better off now." "True enough, but still, I'm sorry you had to go through all that." We clinked our beers together, and I appreciated the gesture. Douglas was a good guy who had been caught in a bad situation. I didn't hold anything against him. As the evening wore on and people started heading home, Jennifer and I sat on our back deck, tired but happy. "This is nice," she said, leaning against my shoulder. "Having actual friends in the neighborhood instead of just people we wave to. It is nice, worth fighting for." "Do you ever regret installing the heated driveway? If you had known all the trouble it would cause," I thought about it for a moment. "No, I did nothing wrong. Barbara was the one who turned it into a fight, and she faced the consequences. If I had given in, she would have just found something else to target, and she would have kept bullying people indefinitely. Someone had to stand up to her eventually." "My hero," Jennifer said with a smile, kissing my cheek. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains. Cooper lounged at our feet, exhausted from playing with all the neighborhood kids. Life was good. The following winter was even busier than the last. I landed several major contracts, including one with Denver International Airport for overflow plowing during major storms. The business was thriving, and I hired 3 more employees to keep up with demand. My heated driveway continued to work perfectly, clearing snow automatically whenever needed. I never had to shovel, never had to scrape ice, never had to worry about slipping when I came home exhausted from a long shift. It was everything I had wanted when I installed it, and I was glad I had fought to keep it. I heard through the grapevine that Barbara had moved to Arizona, presumably to get away from Colorado winters and the reputation she had earned. Her ex-husband, they divorced during her legal troubles, still lived in the area and occasionally came to neighborhood events. He was a nice guy who seemed relieved to be free of her controlling behavior. The civil lawsuit settlement money, combined with the insurance payout for the repairs, ended up funding a nice vacation for Jennifer and me. We spent 2 weeks in Hawaii, enjoying the beach and not thinking about snow, HOA, or any of the drama. It was exactly what we needed. When we got back, I found a letter waiting from the county supervisor. They were offering me an expanded contract to handle snow removal for additional areas around Morrison. It was a significant increase in responsibility and revenue. I accepted immediately and started planning how to scale up operations to handle the additional work. By the time the 2nd anniversary of the heated driveway incident rolled around, it felt like ancient history. The neighborhood had moved on, my business was thriving, and my relationship with the HOA was completely professional and drama-free. Patricia had been re-elected as president unanimously, and the board was functioning well. I did keep one memento from the whole ordeal, a framed copy of the local news article about Barbara's arrest. Not because I was vindictive, but because it reminded me of an important lesson about standing up for yourself and not letting bullies win. I kept it in my office at home, where only I could see it. Sometimes clients or friends would ask about it, and I would tell the story. It always got a reaction: shock at Barbara's behavior, anger at the HOA overreach, satisfaction at the eventual justice. Everyone could relate to dealing with unreasonable authority figures, whether it was an HOA president, a bad boss, or an overzealous bureaucrat. The story also served as a cautionary tale for other HOA boards in the area. I heard from several people that their boards had referenced my case when discussing new policies, specifically to avoid the kind of abuse of power that Barbara had engaged in. If my ordeal helped prevent even one other homeowner from dealing with similar harassment, then it was worth it. As the years went on, the heated driveway became just another feature of my house, something I used and appreciated but didn't think much about. It worked reliably, saved me time and effort, and caused exactly zero problems for anyone in the neighborhood. Which, of course, was exactly what I had told Barbara from the beginning. Jennifer and I eventually started a family, welcoming twin daughters in the 4th year after the incident. Having kids made me even more grateful for the heated driveway. No worrying about them slipping on ice when walking to the car for school. No concerns about them playing outside after a snowfall. It was a safety feature as much as a convenience. The girls grew up in Pinecrest Meadows, playing with neighbor kids, and enjoying the kind of stable, friendly community that Barbara had nearly destroyed with her tyrannical approach to HOA governance. They had no idea about the drama that had preceded their birth, and I saw no reason to tell them until they were old enough to understand. My snow removal business became one of the most successful in Jefferson County. I eventually moved the operations to a dedicated facility instead of running everything from my house, which made life easier and more professional. But I kept the house in Pinecrest Meadows because it was home, and because I genuinely liked the neighborhood and the people in it. Patricia served as HOA president for 5 years before stepping down, and her successor was equally reasonable and competent. The nightmare of Barbara's reign seemed like a distant memory, though older residents still sometimes referenced it as a cautionary tale at community meetings. I stayed in touch with Greg, my attorney, who had gone on to handle several other HOA abuse cases based on the publicity from mine. He told me that the Colorado legislative reforms had made a real difference, giving homeowners more tools to push back against unreasonable restrictions and making HOA boards more cautious about overstepping their authority. The heated driveway itself needed some maintenance over the years, replacement of a few heating elements, updates to the thermostat system, but it continued to work reliably. I calculated at one point that it had saved me over 500 hours of shoveling and scraping across the winters I had owned it. That alone justified the cost, not even counting the convenience and safety factors. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized it had been a defining moment in my life. Not just the conflict itself, but how I had handled it. I had stood my ground against unreasonable demands, refused to be bullied, and ultimately prevailed both legally and morally. Barbara had learned that abusing power has consequences, and the neighborhood had learned that bad leadership doesn't have to be tolerated. The incident also taught me about the importance of community. The support I received from neighbors like Douglas and Susan, the legal assistance from Greg, the fair investigation by the sheriff's department, all of it had been crucial. Standing up to a bully was important, but I couldn't have done it alone. As I sat in my garage one winter morning, years after the whole saga began, watching the heated driveway automatically clear fresh snow while I sipped my coffee, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because I had won some petty conflict, but because I had fought for a principle and helped create positive change. The snow continued to fall, and my driveway continued to stay clear. Somewhere in Arizona, Barbara was presumably dealing with desert heat instead of mountain snow. And here in Morrison, Pinecrest Meadows was thriving as a real community instead of a dictatorship. It had been a long, strange journey from that first confrontation in my garage to this peaceful morning. There had been stress, anger, legal battles, and criminal prosecutions. But there had also been growth, reform, and ultimately justice. And my heated driveway worked perfectly, just as I had always known it would. The end of the story came not with drama but with quiet contentment. I finished my coffee, climbed into my truck, and headed out to plow the commercial lots that needed early morning service. As I drove past Spruce Lane, now home to friendly neighbors who had never tried to fine me for improving my own property, I smiled. Sometimes standing your ground against unreasonable authority figures leads to real consequences and real change. Sometimes refusing to be bullied makes an entire community better. And sometimes a heated driveway is just a heated driveway, a practical improvement that causes no harm and provides real benefits. Barbara had turned my simple home improvement into a personal crusade, and it had cost her everything. I had simply defended my right to use my own property as I saw fit, and I had come out stronger for it. That's the real lesson of the heated driveway saga. Bullies count on people backing down to avoid conflict. When you refuse to back down, when you stand firm and force them to face the consequences of their unreasonable demands, they usually crumble. Barbara had seemed powerful and intimidating when she was waving papers in my face and threatening fines. But when confronted with actual legal scrutiny and the consequences of her criminal behavior, she fell apart. I thought about all of this as I plowed parking lots and driveways around Morrison. The sun was coming up over the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful, and it was home. When I finally returned to my house late that afternoon, exhausted from a long day of work, I pulled into my clear, dry driveway and parked in my garage. The heated system had done its job perfectly, as it always did. Jennifer's car was already there, and I could see lights on in the kitchen where she was probably making dinner. I sat in the truck for a moment, just appreciating the simple normalcy of it all. No HOA drama, no criminal investigations, no legal battles. Just a man coming home to his family after an honest day's work, parking in a driveway that he had every right to heat if he wanted to. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living your life the way you want to live it, standing up for your rights when necessary, and refusing to let petty tyrants dictate your choices. The heated driveway had been worth every penny I spent installing it, and worth every ounce of effort I put into defending it. Not because of the convenience or the safety or the time savings, though all of those were real benefits. It was worth it because it represented something bigger, the right to make your own decisions about your own property without unreasonable interference. Barbara had tried to take that right away and she had failed. The neighborhood was better for her failure. I was better for standing up to her. And the heated driveway would keep working for decades to come, a quiet monument to the principle that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's easier to give in. I got out of the truck, closed the garage door, and went inside to my family. Cooper bounded up to greet me, tail wagging, and I could hear my daughters laughing in the living room. The smell of Jennifer's cooking filled the house. This was what I had fought for. Not really the heated driveway itself, but the right to have it. The right to improve my home without arbitrary interference. The right to live in a community governed by reasonable rules fairly applied, not by the whims of a petty dictator. And now I had that right, secured through patience, persistence, and a willingness to stand my ground when it mattered most. The heated driveway still worked perfectly, the neighborhood was thriving, and Barbara was gone. Sometimes stories end with dramatic confrontations or explosive revelations. This one ended with quiet victory, and the satisfaction of knowing that standing up to bullies really does make a difference. The snow would keep falling every winter. My driveway would keep staying clear, and life in Pinecrest Meadows would keep getting better, one reasonable HOA decision at a time, That was enough for me.